Welcome to Tombstone Tuesdays. This is the weekly streaming show about historic cemeteries and the people who love exploring them. I'm your host, Tui Snider, and in case you don't know me, I write books, I give talks, and I do a lot of research. And so does our guest, who I'll be bringing on here shortly. Today's guest is none other than fellow author Kathy Benjamin. And we have got some really zany topics to talk about tonight. There's a real weirdo thief, and he ended up banished to an island. We're going to talk about fantasy coffins, all sorts of fun things. Now, before I bring her on, I do have a few small announcements here. First of all, if you are someone who uses Twitter, I wanted to invite you to follow my cemetery themed account. Now, I've been using Twitter since like 2008, and you know what? It's gotten really noisy, I gotta say. So I have on my main Twitter, I just talk about anything and everything, but if you're really interested in what I have to say about historic cemeteries, check out Tombstone Tui, that's me. It's just a smaller account, but it's more focused. I thought that would be something I would give a try. Of course, I have to bring and mention this week's sponsor. This week's sponsor for the show is none other than Grove's Chill Tonic. Now, it is tasteless Chill Tonic, by the way, and it makes children as fat as pigs. And I've got to say, this is actually, I do a lot of research that has to do with like the 1800s. And so when I'm in newspaper archives, I see Grove's Chill Tonic all over the place. And a very funny looking ad, obviously, but there is a reason for that. Back in the 1800s, of course, there was much higher infant mortality, so people wanted their kids to be chubby. If your kid was not gaining weight, then they might not make it. So nowadays we're worried about childhood obesity and things like that. But back then, you wanted to make your kid as fat as pigs. Now, of course, the real supporters are my Patreon supporters. So I want to give them a shout out. I've got Anne, Bob, Connie, and VJ, Julie, Margaret, Hugh, Mikhail, Naomi, Angelica. Angelica is brand new, I have to say. She lives in Boston. I'm going to have her on as a guest in a few weeks. I forget which date. But she joined at the postcard level, which means I send her a historic... It's really hard to figure out. When you use this software, it reverses everything, so it's like cutting your hair in the mirror. Anyway, I will be sending her a postcard with I take a photo and I make physical postcards and I send them out every month. I love postcards. I love getting them and sending them. So, Angelica, woohoo! I also have to give a shout out to Scott, Ghost Cat, Ian, Jessica, Peter, Sarah, Rachel, and of course, the other Tui, no relation to me, Tui. So I think that's really cool. Thank you guys so much. Now, I have something to say about last week's cemetery photos of the week. I shared a bunch of photos that a guy who subscribes to my newsletter, Scott Wise, had sent, and so I attributed all the photos to him, but actually they should have been attributed to Bill Highland instead, so sorry about that. Of course, this week's, I have to have a cemetery photo of the week as well. So this one comes from a newsletter reader, John Dryzga. I might be mangling his name, probably am mangling his name, but he sent a really beautiful photo. I thought this was really nice, and here's what he had to say about it. He said this was taken at Grove Church Cemetery in North Bergen, New Jersey. And I gotta say, I bet it is covered in snow today. In fact, if you're watching, I'm really curious, is it snowing where you are? If you're watching, of course, I don't know when you're watching. If you're watching it live, perhaps it's snowing where you're at. Not snowing here in Texas, but it is still pretty darn chilly. I really like this photo. So it looks like a family plot. We've got that headstone in the middle where it says mother and then the scroll. Now, one thing that's interesting, a lot of times on the older headstones, a common, well, I would have to say one of my favorite symbols is when they have ivy carved onto the headstone. Ivy stands for friendship, and that's because ivy clings to you the way a good friend should. Now here we have literal ivy growing all over. It looks beautiful. But I do like to point out that when it comes to cemetery symbols, it's not just random ideas. It's that why something symbolizes something. There's usually an interesting reason behind it, and that can help make them more easy to remember. Anyway, once again, I want to thank John for allowing me to share his photo with you guys. Now I have this for this week's book. Of course, I have to share the book from our guest. This is Funerals to Die For. I've got to tell you, this is a marvelous book. You know, after the show, you need to rush over and buy it. It's great. I totally love it. If anyone's read it, you know what I'm talking about. The chapters are fairly short, but they're chock full of really interesting tidbits. And it's written in a very tongue-in-cheek manner. So, I mean, you will end up laughing. You're not just going to be depressed as you read Funerals to Die For. And the full title is, I'm going to read it here, The Craziest, Creepiest, and Most Bizarre Funeral Traditions and Practices Ever. So we're going to be talking about some of them. We won't even have time to just, all we're going to do today is just scratch the surface. So that's why you're going to have to go and get the book. Dive deeper. Now, I've been asking for suggestions from you guys, and I did. I got an email this week from someone who had watched and is on my newsletter. And this came from a guy named Tony, and he says, see if I can get it up here a little bigger. Oops, I brought Kathy over here in a second. Pretend she's not there, eh? All right. He goes, hi, Tui. Love the new show and all the great guests and photos. And yes, even your hats. Speaking of my hat, I did buy this one in New Orleans a few years ago. I really love it. It's got the little flower, and it's like you can kind of shape it all these different ways, wear it sort of differently. But that's not what Tony was writing about. He said, you asked for suggestions. How about this? Share an excerpt from your talks or books, maybe as it is related in topic with the guest that you have that day. Just a thought. Keep up the good work. Kind regards, Tony. So that got me to thinking, and he said, you know, maybe something from my talks, and I thought, you know what? I have not given a talk in, oh my gosh, this is a picture of me at the very last time I gave a public talk. That was last January 30th, if you could believe it, over in Weatherford, Texas. I got to say, I really love this dress. I don't know if you can see, it got little tombstones on the bottom. I don't get, you know, it's got long sleeves, so I don't get a chance to wear it too much here in hot, hot Texas. But it's just crazy that it's been a year since I gave an in-person talk. So I thought, well, why not? I will grab just a couple slides from that talk. So I brought up the keynote, and I looked for something that would relate to some of the topics that I'm going to get into with Kathy today, and I came up with this, coffin versus casket. This is something I like to bring up in my talks simply because they are words that we tend to use them interchangeably. But if you want to be precise, you want to be persnickety, you want to be, you know, zero in on what they actually mean, it is one of those words that actually they mean two different things. So this shape that we see here, this is a coffin. When I try to think of a coffin, I think of Dracula, right? The Dracula shape. It's known as an anthropoid shape, means human shape, because you can kind of see where it's thinner up at the head, a little wider at the shoulders, narrower at the feet. It's that six-sided shape. So that was the most popular thing to be buried in, was a coffin, until we get to the 1800s when caskets became a thing. Now a casket, unlike the coffin, it's rectangular and it is meant to look like a bed. There's all sorts of fluffy pillows in there. They're meant to be quite comfy. And the reason for this is that they are part of the whole Victorian era tendency to use euphemisms of sleep for death. And that was a big thing that came about during the Victorian era. Now, if you're reading an old book, you might come across the word casket in reference to a jewelry box. It might say that she reached and pulled the casket from her dresser and opened it up, and inside was a necklace or something like that. That's because casket meant a little box where you might hold something precious, like jewels. So it really was a euphemism. Here's one thing I found really fascinating about caskets versus coffins. Caskets were actually quite controversial when they were first introduced, and one of the people who really took offense to the whole idea of using caskets as instead of coffins was this guy who you might recognize as Nathaniel Hawthorne, the guy who wrote, Scarlet Letter and other novels. But he had a book of essays in 1863 in which he says, "Caskets, a vile modern phrase which compels a person to shrink from the idea of being buried at all." And then I always imagine him saying harumph after that. But I thought that was interesting. So there, I took a suggestion from Tony. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want, I could do that, something like that again. Just keep your questions and suggestions coming. And I'm getting a little better at noticing when people leave comments during the show. So I'm going to, as Kathy talks, I will be highlighting comments and trying to do a better job of that. Oh, I see a few people here. Woohoo! I see people. Okay, I will be bringing them in as we chat. Thanks, you guys, so much for coming. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce this week's guest, Kathy Benjamin, and I will tell you a little about her, and then I'll bring her on for real. So, Kathy Benjamin is a writer and editor at grunge.com, a former columnist at cracked.com and mentalfloss.com. Kathy is the author of Funerals to Die For, the craziest, creepiest, and most bizarre funeral traditions and practices ever. She also contributed to Cracked.com's publication, the D Textbook, the stuff you didn't know about the stuff you thought you knew. Her new book is called It's Your Funeral, Plan the Celebration of a Lifetime Before It's Too Late. Sounds great, and maybe we'll be able to have her on later this year, who knows? This book is coming out in the summer of 2021 from Quirk Books. Kathy lives in Austin, Texas with her husband, Simon, and her dog, Briscoe. Okay, everybody. Let me bring Kathy into the chat. Ah, it worked. Hey,
Hi.
Kathy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I've really been looking forward to our chat today. I love your book. First off, this is a really great book. I'm trying to get in here. It's hard. Hey, anyway, really enjoyed it. Oh, hey, matching books, booksies. All right. No, I am so curious. How did you end up interested in this topic, and is this something you would always end up making it funny?
Well, fear is the answer to that. Yeah, I went to my first funeral when I was 12 for like a confirmation thing. They wanted me to go to a wedding, a funeral, all the religious big moments. And it was an open casket. I barely knew the woman. I came home and had basically a 12-year-old breakdown. So it really scared me. It was really scary.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was not prepared for it. No one explained anything to me. So that was kind of really horrible, and it kind of stuck with me, and the fear of death and everything. And then I kind of hit college, and I majored in history, and I was like, the way I'm going to deal with this is I'm going to learn everything about death. I'm going to get an A+ in death. And then I'll be able to control it in a way, if I just know everything about it, I'll be able to, and that's where the humor comes in as well.
Yeah.
If it's funny, then you kind of have this control over it. So I took, amazingly, there's quite a lot of classes you can take in history on death and the history of death, history of burial. So I took a bunch of that, and then it was just something I kind of remained interested in. And I started writing online, freelance writing, and I was actually contacted about that book by Adams Media. They said, we've read your stuff. It was such a great email. It was like, we have this book that we think you'd be a really good author for. It's about a very weird topic. And it was like the way they phrased it, I was like, it's going to be about death. Be about death. Be about death.
They're tiptoeing up to it. And you're like,
come on, make it about death. And they were like, yeah, it's going to be about like weird funerals. And I was like, yes. So then I wrote that, and it just, ever since I wrote that, it's become much more of a hobby and an academic interest. And then I was approached to write this new book by Quirk. They emailed me. They were like, do you want to write another book about death? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So it's now my thing. I write 5 books about funerals.
You're the death lady now. Yeah, I know. Like, I'm the cemetery lady. You're the death lady, a funeral lady. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Also, I mean, before the show started, you were telling me about your t-shirt, which I need to get one of it. Do you mind showing? Because I think this is awesome. Sorry to put you on the spot, but
it says, ain't nothing certain but death and Texas.
I think there's a few people from Texas probably watching who you and I both from I totally need that shirt. That is so great. I'll have to find the link for it and maybe stick it in the show notes.
Local Austin artist collective called Beast Syndicate. I have no connection to them whatsoever. I just saw the shirt and was like, I want that shirt.
It's clever. It's a great pun. I have to have it. Like you, I kind of deal with fear through humor as well. That's one reason I know so much about spiders. It's because they scare me on a primal level. Death and spiders really, right up there for me. So anyway, now, does your family think you're odd at all with your interest?
I mean, but just in general.
They know you're odd right now.
Definitely odd. It's something that I suppose over the years has become more normal to them when I just start like talking about it or whatever. But like they've planned their funerals. They have a very thick document explaining what they want, so it's all prepared. I believe it's all paid for. They've done their research. So yeah, it's really good in that way that we can kind of talk about it. But like anyone else, it's like anyone else, they kind of it's not something you want to talk about maybe at dinner or something.
Yeah. Oh no, but that's really great that they have all planned ahead. That's really not the case for so many people, I've got to say. That really is a gift that you can give your family if you can plan ahead.
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. Oh, yes. First topic I wanted to bring up with you. I wanted to talk about hanging coffins. If you could tell us a little about those.
Yeah, so this is kind of
I'll show a couple examples.
South Asian, like parts of China, parts of Indonesia, parts of the Philippines. It's just something that certain tribes in those areas a long time ago, they think maybe in China about 3,000 years ago, in the Philippines about 2,000 years ago, they started hanging coffins instead of burying them.
Ancient.
Like hanging, really. I mean, those coffins don't exist anymore because they're wood and they fall eventually. But they have some that they think are a couple hundred years old still up there, and people are still doing it. It's not as common now, obviously, but I know
this one looks so pretty. I mean, this one is like, wow, what a. That just, and you get the sense that that's a bit treacherous. I wonder how many people die putting him up there.
I mean, it seems like and it'd be so heavy because the coffins are, ideally they're supposed to be carved by the person themselves. Obviously, maybe if you're old age, you're not able to do that, and then your family members would do it. But ideally, you would make your own coffin. They're not as big as ours. So they kind of usually are in a fetal position, going out the way they came in, basically. And then they have to carry them up there, and that is one big solid piece of wood, and then carrying it up with a body in it and hanging it up there. I mean, it really says something about.
Yeah, you mentioned something in the book about how some of them would be full of items for the afterlife too. So they got the person in there, and then they've essentially packed their carry-on.
I mean, it's incredible. And some of them you can see that they're painted with their names or a cross or things like that. Tourists go to see it. You have to be careful. You're not allowed to be under them because they do just collapse. Like eventually the wood goes and they collapse.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, even in historic cemeteries here, you're not supposed to. The real reason you're not supposed to walk across old graves, someone's grave, is because if it's an old coffin, it could crunch in. So I hadn't thought about these just falling on you for sure.
Fall on you. Wow. They disintegrate eventually. Yeah. But the idea, I think, is supposed to be that it's actually a really great idea. It's kind of the opposite of what we have in the West. In the West, we bury you, we put you in the ground, we put you down. And this is raised you up kind of more towards the heavens, towards the afterlife. And that's kind of supposedly the reason is that it's easier for you to get to the afterlife if you're the higher up you are. So the higher up you are, kind of the more important you are, the more important your family was able to get you up that high or whatever.
That makes sense. And there's a lot of myths in different cultures, especially mountainous ones, where they do look to the higher peaks as maybe and beings living there. So maybe this was a way to kind of get you a little closer.
Yeah,
into the.
well, it also makes sense just from I mean, you can see the terrain there. We're talking,
Oh
especially in the
yeah!
Philippines, I think, yeah, I think they're about like 5,000 feet up in the area in the Philippines where they do this. It is incredibly rocky.
Wow.
It's incredibly mountainous. They, they grow rice. So a lot of the land that they do use is rice paddies. So where do you put your cemetery?
Oh
Do you give up an
yeah.
entire piece of land just to bury your bodies? Or this is a very convenient way of getting them out of the way. And yeah.
I had not thought of this as being practical. There really is an element of practicality to it that had escaped me. That is really
Yeah,
cool.
cemeteries take up a lot of room. So if you don't have room or you have rocky, like in Tibet, they do
Hmm.
sky burial because they can't dig graves. So
Makes
yeah,
sense. Wow.
yeah,
Well, I thought that was really neat. That's on my, bucket list, proverbial.
yeah.
All right, I wanted to talk about these. I love these, the fantasy coffins of Ghana. And before you go into it, I'm going to share a few pictures while you're talking because if anyone lives in Texas or can get to Texas, at our National Funeral Museum of History, I think I garbled their name, but that's the basic components, is the National Funeral History Museum is in Houston, and they have lots of cool stuff. So tell us about these fantastical coffins. I think they're so great.
I could talk about these forever. Yeah, the National Funeral Museum, if you can go, if you can get to Houston, it's incredible. Like it's just an incredible friggin' museum.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, they have some fantasy coffins there, and it's and but it's not just there. Like these I think it was 1989. The first ones were shown in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art in New York. These things are art. They really,
I should
really
show
are.
some. Yeah, they are so cool.
Yeah. They are. They're kind of a more naive style, I think, is the technical term artistically. I could be wrong on that, but they're incredible. These carvings and paintings, and the idea is, it started in Ghana, and the idea was to have a coffin that was more personal. That was, I mean, I don't know why you'd want a weird fish thing, but
I know, it's like a crab and a lobster. It's so funny. Maybe he was a crabber. Was he did for a living? I don't know. Yeah, but they're
the first one made specifically to be a coffin. The man whose, I'm sorry, name I don't remember, but he made it for his grandmother who had always wanted to travel and was unable to in life, and so he made her a plane, and so she was buried in this plane. And I think that's such a beautiful idea.
It's such a sweet sentiment. And this one, maybe they raised chickens or something. It's just, they are so cute. I just kind of want one in my house. They are whimsical and, to store things, not just bodies, but I just think they're really sweet. And they do have quite a collection of them, like we were saying, down in Houston, if you want to see them. That's neat that they were, I love that they were at the Museum of Modern Art.
Because they are. I mean, they really are. But then that brings you to this idea of like, they're art, but you're putting it in the ground. You're taking something that is, proper art that can be displayed in a museum like that, and then you put it in the ground and it decays and everything. And so what does that kind of say about our relationship with death? And I think we've always kind of used art to kind of process death. There's all these pictures about death, famous generals' deaths in battle, things like that. And I think this is just another way of like connecting art and death and like processing it through something beautiful, something creative. They blow my mind.
Go ahead.
Supposedly Jimmy Carter has 2 of them, and
Really?
I just love the idea of that. When unfortunately President Carter dies, he will lay in state in a fantasy coffin.
Oh my goodness. Would maybe it be, do you think it'll be a big peanut or something? Like, what it would be?
I love the idea that he might do that, like in the Capitol in state, and it'd be a little peanut. It would be amazing.
Yeah, that is really interesting. They actually, when people lay in state, they lay in state on something called a catafalque, and they've been using the same one since, like, when you lay in state, you're laying on the same one that Abraham Lincoln did. I mean, it's been used for a long time. I just thought that was kind of cool. It's not like every time there's an official.
I had no idea. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is really an interesting thing. So, like when Antonin Scalia passed away, I was like, oh, I wanted to see what his catafalque. I was like, it's the same one, Anyway,
wow.
All right, but I like this. And so, one thing I thought was interesting. So, this started just as sort of a whimsical thing the guy wanted to do for his grandma. You know, she never traveled, so sweet. But now there are a lot of different people making these, right?
He kind of taught other people, and other people started doing it. It just became very popular, and then obviously it became art, so it wasn't just burial.
I just really love that. That's just really made me smile. You know, I was like, that is so great. I don't know what I would choose. All right, now this place fascinates me. You got to tell us about the Russian town of Dargovs, and I'll just bring the little picture up and let you see if I can put you in. You and that at the same time. I'm trying to figure out the layouts. No, that's not what I wanted. Oh well, here I guess okay. You got me stuck in there too. Okay.
Yeah. So this, I mean, look at it. It looks like a fairy tale, isn't it? Incredible?
I want to go there.
Yeah, it's a little town for dead people, and it's like it. So there's a lot of information on this, and it kind of grew over the years. But the main kind of interesting bit for me is that when plague hit, and I believe the Great Plague, or plague in the 1400s or 1600s, there's all these different times the big plagues hit. So when it hit in this very remote part of Russia, they already were building these to bury people, but they kind of built more. And if you got sick, you would go into one to basically self-isolate.
That part got me. So, you know, how many people would get into them? Like a whole family go and just hang out if they were all sick inside one of these?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not like an expert on these, but from what I've read, it does seem like, you have ones that are whole families, you have ones that are partners or mother and child, more than one skeleton. But obviously, ideally, you would just have the one, because you'd get the person who was sick and get rid of them real quick, get them in there.
Yeah, that's true. What got me though,
okay, go ahead.
You were just saying at some point you could be hanging out in one of these and people would come from town to like push bread through the window to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like, ideally, you're not going to die,
Hopefully not.
People did get the plague and then get better. And so you go in there, you self-isolate, which we all know about right now.
Yeah, but, for sure.
No internet or television, you're just sitting there, it'd be horrible. But
so you're in there,
you're feeling terrible, you're bored. And so people would come. There's a little tiny window, you can kind of see it on some of them, and they would push, kind of like in jail, where they push the food through the little slot. And they would give you some bread. And then, if you were alive, you'd eat it and you'd get better, and you'd leave eventually and come back. And, didn't die, yay me.
I have never heard of. I've heard of. There's this village that's known where the whole village isolated themselves during the plague, and they put up barriers around the town, and they would they'd put money and vinegar to they didn't, obviously didn't have the whole germ theory down, but they knew that somehow it was passed on things you touched. And so they actually self-isolated as a whole village, but self-isolating in an actual tomb, like I'm here, that seems so super practical, like, it saves them from having to transport my body. And if I'm well enough to leave, then great. I mean, that's just what a mindset those people had. But it looks so cute.
It does. It looks so cute. It looks like a little village for like trolls or something. It's so adorable. And it's such a morbid history. And there's always legends around these. And there's a legend that if you walk through there, you won't get you'll die there, kind of thing. And so the locals supposedly don't go. But of course, it's a tourist attraction, so everyone else goes.
I would totally love to go there. It reminds me of Hobbiton Village. But here's a look inside of one of them. I thought this was super creepy. It's like, so it's almost like they didn't bury the people. They just let them die inside the little thing.
Yeah. Well, it's like a little tomb. You've got your little mausoleum already. And I think before the plague, when they originally built these, and I think in between them, plagues, as we know, screw everything up when it comes to funerals. But they would bury the people. Not bury. They put them in, but they put them in a boat, like a wooden boat.
Oh yeah, you said there are little boats in there.
Yeah, there's actually no rivers around there. These people have nothing to do with rivers or anything. But the idea was that to get to the afterlife, to get to heaven, you would have to go across a really big river, kind of like the Greeks. But you needed your own
Yeah,
boat.
that's so interesting. I mean, at least they had, other cultures where I've heard they have that concept of crossing the river over the dead. There's like a body of water nearby. And like, we talked about the hanging coffins. They were thinking of, inspired probably by the mountains. But what inspired these people to have the idea of boats? That is really interesting. I wonder if some traveler came through and told them, or you wonder how ideas like that take hold sometimes.
Yeah, and you would assume, Russia, they would be, Russian Orthodox Christian, and there's not a Christian version of like a river.
That's true. Yeah,
it might be like an older local belief or something. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. How interesting. Well, very fascinating. Anyway, it looks super cute, but when you peek inside, eek! All right. Really fascinating. What do we have next? Oh, this place is another, looks different from the outside than on the inside. This is Prague's Church of Bones. If you could tell us, this is what it looks like on the outside. But what will we find inside, Kathy?
Oh, right. Well, it's an ossuary, that tells you. Means place where we keep bones. And, they call it the Church of Bones. They're not subtle. Prague's not subtle.
No.
Yeah, it's so it's incredible. So I don't know if you want to show pictures, but
I will. I was just leading up to. I got a bunch. I love this place. I want to go.
So what happened to make this place special was legend had it that a monk had gone to the Holy Land kind of on a pilgrimage, and he'd come back and he'd had a bag of dirt from Jerusalem, and it was like supposed to be blessed and holy and everything, and so he'd spread the dirt on the church ground, and this is back in the time when people got buried on the church ground, the cemetery, and so people wanted to get buried there. People from far away wanted to get buried there because it was this special dirt, from the Holy Land. It was, so it got very, very popular. Then, and this is going to be a theme, then plague hit.
Yeah, plague! We can't escape it.
Tens and tens of thousands of people died, and you've got a lot. That takes up a lot of room. You've got 40,000, 10,000 bodies, whatever. It takes up a lot of room. And so what happens, what you get in countries where they run out of room, you see this in Paris, you see this in England, is they dig up all of the bones, because by this point it's just bones, and they'll store them. They'll put them in what's called an ossuary. And so originally they just had a regular ossuary. They just put them basically in a basement, stacked them up. And then I have the exact date, 1870, they said to a wood carver, they said, "Hey, can you arrange these?" And he's like, "Yeah, all right, I'll arrange them." And then he did this.
Yeah, check this out, peoples. This is what it looks like inside. Sure, I can arrange the bones. Let me be all artsy. Here, I'll show some close-ups. That just must be so incredible. Like, here's the crest.
I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. Holy guacamole. Here's like a close-up. This one,
teeny tiny.
He gets me. That little, you were saying that's like a deformed hand that he used to make it look like a bird. He got very creative.
I mean, he was so creative. And you saw on the last one, some of those bones are teeny tiny.
Yeah.
Look at how tiny some of those bones are. And so it's
chandelier.
Chandelier. That's
what I was researching this, reading your thing and getting some photos to go with it. I got, in the Beauty and the Beast, there's that one Gaston song where he's like, he uses antlers in all of his decorating. It's like, I was like, why am I humming Gaston? And I realized, it's because of like he uses bones in all of his decorating. Anyway, if anyone has seen that, it's just crazy. This one, look at that. I mean, it's eerie. It's
it's I mean, again, it's art. It's taking death and turning it into art and kind of processing. I mean, you look at that and you go, wow, that's crazy. That's cool. And it's like every single one of those heads was a person, who lived and had a life and died and was scared, all of that. But you look at it now and it's this work of art, and it's incredible that we can do that. We can feel comfortable enough kind of, or use it to process death by saying, we're going to take these remains of what was living, breathing humans, and we're going to make something weird and beautiful, and it's going to, be meaningful in another way. It's 40,000 people, 40,000 people's bones. Yeah.
I'll show the pictures again. What gets me too is that it shows how our idea of what to do with the deceased really has changed. I mean, this idea would never fly now. Like, hey, I got this idea. Why don't I, let me do an art project with all these? But no, we would not do that. But in 1870, apparently it was like, hey, we got all these bones. What are you going to do with them? whatever his name was, and he's like, I got an idea, let me roll with it. And it really is beautiful and eerie, and I just think, yeah, it really is, like you mentioned, everyone's a life. I love, I'm fascinated.
Yeah, it's just so weird, and it's not something that's been like copied. Like, this is, if you want to see this, this is where you go.
Oh, I was going to ask, did it inspire a fad or anything? No.
I mean, no, but it should have. It's, I mean, you know, you've got the Paris catacombs and everything, but
True.
They don't look like that. You know,
no, they're just sort of stacked like someone had OCD. You know, it's not like, no, it wasn't. This is really.
That's what the Paris catacombs is. What you would expect when you tell someone to organize the bones, not what this is.
Yeah, kind of like just Dewey Decimal or something. This is more like, woo, it's like fractals, you know? I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Love it.
All right. Well, yeah, everybody, if anyone's been there, let me know. That's definitely on my list too. Your book has really inspired me to do some research and also just plan, like, my goodness, there are some places I do need to see in this world while I'm still walking around. Now, this next one I want to talk about, this one really sent me into a little bunny trail of digging through old newspaper archives because I just had to see. So I found some funny, interesting little snippets that I'll share while you're talking about it. But this is, I think we've mentioned grave robbing on the show before. I've certainly come across it, and I think a lot of us know that, in the 1800s, it was hard for anatomy students to get a hold of bodies. So that a lot of times when graves were robbed, they were taking the bodies and taking them to a college to be used for anatomy class. And other times people were just robbing them of the goods that they had in there. But this guy was a little different. This Jean-Baptiste, tell us about him.
So Jean-Baptiste, we know he existed because it is one of those stories where you go, are we sure? And there's a huge amount of
Chicago Sun.
Huge amount of evidence that this guy was real. We know we're not sure where he was from originally. There's different stories. He may have been French, etc. But he bounced around. We know he ended up in Australia. And from Australia, during this period, so this is the mid 1800s, and the Mormon church has started. And one of the things the Mormon church has always done is missionaries. And so they literally had a ship go to Australia and be like, hey, we have this great new religion. Hop on our ship, come to Utah. And so that's how he ends up in Utah. He gets on a ship full of Mormon converts and comes to Utah. I think he was in California for a little bit, and then he came to Utah. And so he gets there. He gets married, great. Life's going great. And he becomes a grave digger, good, solid work. And so this is kind of a complicated story. Basically, the governor of Utah and the Mormons had a problem with each other. So the governor of Utah was kind of run out, and he was then attacked by, I have the guy's name, he was attacked by Moroni Clausen. Moroni Clausen was arrested for attacking the governor, was in jail, escaped from jail, and during the escape was shot and died. So we have a dead criminal, basically.
Yeah.
He needed to be buried, but his family, no one came forward to claim him. No one was there to pay for the burial. So a police officer named Henry Heath said, I will pay for his burial. So he paid for his burial. He also bought him a brand new suit so he could be buried in new clothes. So they bury him. Little bit of time goes by. Morone's family find out that he's dead, finally, and say, okay, no, we want the body and we don't want it where it is. We're going to come get it. So they come get it. They dig him up. They open the coffin. He's naked and face down. Wow. Family is furious, obviously.
Yeah. It's pretty rude.
Yeah. They go to, everyone's like, oh my gosh. Henry Heath is like, I know he wasn't buried naked because I bought his brand new suit for him. So they kind of ask questions of a couple of people. They end up at the grave diggers at Jean-Baptiste's house. Jean-Baptiste is not there. He's out digging a grave. His wife is there. They say, can we look around? She goes, sure. Immediately, they realize there are boxes everywhere that are full of like bit misty, dirty clothes, not brand new, clean clothes. And they're like, oh my gosh, okay. So they go to the graveyard. They find Jean-Baptiste digging a grave. They're like, did you do this? Did you take the clothes off on these corpses? And he falls to his knees, begs for his life, basically admits it or whatever. He gets arrested. I don't know if you want me to pause. The story keeps going.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, there's the story of the ghoul's life and death. This is go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, he gets arrested, and we know he got arrested especially because Brigham Young, who was head of the Mormon church at that point, gave a sermon about this guy. And says, hanging is too good for him. What he did, hanging is too good. And there's no point just putting him in jail. That's kind of not punishment enough kind of thing. So they decide what they're going to do is banish him to this little tiny island in the middle of Salt Lake, at like the actual Salt Lake. And it just had a little shack that had like a couple weeks of provisions, and some people had cattle on the little island. So they row him out there. The people who have to have their cattle there, they kind of go check every few weeks. And I think it was about 6 weeks later, he's not there. And he appeared to have like killed a cow and used some branches.
Oh yeah, there's some great drawings. They show him. So this article, they describe him as he becomes the wild man of the woods. Mm-hmm. and here he is, he with a wild shriek, he rushes to the cavern. I like that. I like the artist rendition. In this one, here he is having his breakfast. How the old man prepares his breakfast. This is him, the wild man, like ripping a goat. He's become feral, apparently, now that he's out.
He was there like 6 weeks.
I know, but I like the artist renditions. The 1895 Chicago Sun. They're bringing it up years later. It's just kind of funny. Yeah. Then this?
I think probably there's like some aspect of it's the Mormons, and the Mormons were seen as very odd and kind of out in the West and doing their weird thing.
Oh,
and so
that could be, yeah.
Mormon, but he's also like banished on an island. So this guy is like Robinson Crusoe crazy going on here.
Well, it's so bizarre too, because some accounts say that he had an iron helmet welded to his skull, a ball and chain on his leg, and grave robber branded on his forehead, which is a lot of letters to get on a forehead. I doubt that was legible. Do you think? I mean, God, I can't read that.
or something.
Yeah, maybe that would be a little more. Yeah, it was just such a crazy tale. I had to dig. I liked that I found a few illustrations, just the old illustrations of the day. It's just like the crazy guy. And then what do we have here? Oh, and then in 1893, they said a party of duck hunters found a human skeleton. It had a ball and chain on its leg. So probably I don't know how many people they put ball and chains. You never really think those were used.
Well, and my research, again, not an expert, but my research basically said that Henry Heath, the guy who had kind of started all this by paying for the guy's suit, he was like, we didn't put a ball and chain on him. Like he didn't.
So they just.
So it's we don't know. It could be. It definitely could be. But
rumors grow. I mean,
When you're reading newspapers from the mid to late 1800s, you got to take everything with such a big grain of salt.
Oh, I know. There's this crazy, crazy stuff. But yeah, that did really, I mean, from this to like, gotta rip a goat open for breakfast.
My absolute favorite thing about this story is what the heck was his wife doing? Like, she claimed to have no idea. And they just walked into the house, and supposedly these boxes he robbed 300 graves. So he has like 300 boxes full of dirt-covered clothes and some women's clothes. He didn't just rob, he wasn't just robbing men. He had women's clothes as well. What is his wife doing? Sitting there going, oh, yeah, this is normal.
I saw one account describe her as feeble-minded. So maybe he got someone who wouldn't really, So I think because I was looking, what happened to her? It didn't seem like they punished her other than, they got rid of him. So, yeah. And then in your book, you mentioned that they buried the clothes.
Yes. Yeah. They apparently took everything. They didn't know what to do with it. And they laid it out in like church or somewhere like that where everyone could come. And it was, if you saw something and you were like, that was from my relative, you could claim it and do whatever with it. But obviously a lot of things didn't get claimed. And so after a while, they took everything that was left and they buried it in a mass grave in the cemetery, which I think is a really interesting kind of symbolic.
Yeah.
Like he's went into the ground with people and they're not with him now, but we're going to put them back in the ground too.
I wonder if they were thinking that those clothes would be useful at Judgment Day or if it was more symbolic. It's hard to know. I mean, back then, a lot of cases I read, people really took Judgment Day very seriously, like be buried with a clean suit to put on, Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's actually really interesting. Yeah, like they would be raised on Judgment Day and they'd all be naked and they'd be like, wait, it's okay, our clothes are over there.
Hey, that's mine. Yeah. yeah, turn around.
Let me go grab that. Yeah. Never thought of that. Love it.
Yeah. Well, another thing you mentioned in your book, and I kind of wonder if these are going to be having a resurgence. With the whole COVID thing, you talk about drive-through funeral homes. I would think these places would be sadly doing well now. Here in Texas, we actually have drive-through liquor stores, and I had read that they are doing well during the pandemic, which I thought was hilarious. I moved here from Washington State, and I'm like, what? Drive-through liquor store? And my husband Larry told me that really up until a few years ago, you could even, when you got something from a drive-through liquor store, they would ask you, like a six-pack, how many of the beers should be open. You could be a cocktail party on wheels, like crazy, but this is Texas. But getting back to the whole drive-through funeral homes, tell me about these, the funerals.
Yeah, I think these are really the second one. So the first one opened in Atlanta, but the second one opened in Compton, and one of the reasons was gang warfare.
Wow,
because funerals, kind of like the mafia or the Yakuza, funerals became a place you knew everyone was going to be there. Go and kill them, like retaliation.
My gosh. Yeah, I've seen mobster movies. I should have put that together. Gosh,
It's like a proper thing that was happening. And so it was really, I think and I think that tells us a lot about COVID as well. It was done because it was going to make people safer. They put up glass, and it was bulletproof in this case, in the Compton one. And they laid people out with the open coffin, and people can drive by. And right now it would be such a good idea. It's one of those things that when all of this is over, we're all going to have to really study what just happened with funerals, because it's fascinating how, so many people are dying, and then we have to completely uproot the way we mourn, because you can't have everyone go to a funeral right now. And so this just shows, like in the future, if maybe this is an option, maybe this is a way to keep everyone safer from a variety of things. I think in my book, I mentioned things like, if you're elderly, if you work odd hours, and you can't get to a funeral that's in the middle of the day or something like that. If you kind of want to mourn privately, like, you're a secret wife. And
no kidding. Wow.
You're the second family that no one knows about, come by and mourn. But it's just kind of, it's different. And I suppose in a way it seems kind of impersonal, because you're, away from the body or whatever. But I think when you have these things like COVID, it's a really worthwhile thing to think about.
Yeah, you have to get clever. You have to get creative. I thought that was really interesting. Wow. All right. So in your book, I learned so much from your book. Really great stuff, everybody. You guys need to get her book once again, Funerals to Die For. You will learn a lot. Now, this was something I thought was really interesting. You said the most popular cemetery name in the Wild West. I had not thought about that, because these days I joke that the John Smith of cemetery names is Oakwood, because people are always coming up. Have you seen Oakwood? Oakwood. There's always every city. But back in the Wild West days, it was, take it away,
Boot Hill. So there are Boot Hills that is one word, and there's Boot Hill that's two words. But
I was wondering on that.
Yeah. Yes, that is not a typo in my book. The one in Tombstone is one word. The one in Tombstone, Arizona is one word, and the one in Deadwood is two words. So, you've gotta, when you're editing, you gotta make sure you get it right. But so it was basically, people died in the Wild West with their boots on, someone got in a fight, they cheated at poker. That kind of stuff really happened. And it was called, quote unquote, lead poisoning.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And you got shot. And so, the idea is you died with your boots on. And so we're going to bury you in a place called Boot Hill. And it just exploded.
There's Les Moore. He's my favorite. This is my buddy Mark when he was a kid. He let me use these photos. So anyway,
that's amazing. I just cannot believe that's real. But
I thought it was a joke.
Yeah, it seems like a joke. But there are other ones that are funny, just not as funny as this in the cemetery. And it really seems like, we joke about death.
Well, go ahead and tell them about Les Moore, because they might not know.
So
that's okay.
Les Moore, I don't have it memorized, but it says, can you read it?
Yeah, I can read it. Okay, so you were in the book. You mentioned that he worked at the post office or something like that. It's someone's postage. It's kind of like the first time someone went postal, because their package was a little bit damaged, and so they shot him. His name was Lester Moore, and they shot him 4 times. And so on this headstone, or on that headstone, on this piece of wood for his tomb, his monument, it says, "Here lies Lester Moore." Yeah, grave marker. Thank you. "Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44, no less, no more. And it's just such a jokey little epitaph, but it is true. And that's like I said, my good buddy. I went to college with Mark, so there's Mark. When he was a kid.
It's old. It's amazing. It's real. It's they had fun with it. I'm sure Lester Moore would have enjoyed it.
I think so. Now, why were so many? I got to go to a boot hill up in Skagway, Alaska, and you were mentioning that death by lightning strike was a popular. Now, why is that?
Well, when you went out west, a lot of times you weren't with your family. Like it'd be a son or something. They'd go out to get their fortune in the west or whatever. And so then you'd get lead poisoning. You'd be shot over something stupid and die. And your family back east proper maybe doesn't want to know, have that shame that you were killed in a Wild West shootout or whatever. And so you would have been struck by lightning.
I think that is so fascinating. Yeah, so you could be studying, meteorology and go, wow, a lot of people were struck by lightning back then and not know that it's a euphemism. I love that.
What was it about this place that there was so much lightning?
They don't get much now. So I had to show this because I was digging through my photos, and this was just a criminal who was Soapy Smith. He was well known up there. But when I was up in Skagway, it started off as a really nice day, but it's Alaska, and people told us dress so that you got lots of layers because the weather around here can kick up real fast. We actually took them literally, and we did. We were there. It was nice, and all of a sudden the weather turned, and this photo just cracked me up because my scarf, that's me. I had to wear my sunglasses are protecting me from pellets of sand flying through the air. Whoa. And I was just like, ah! And Larry's like, oh my God, let me get your photo. Your scarf is going, which way is the wind blowing? Gee, not too hard to tell. So that was a fun day. And so we had to flee a little earlier. But yeah, I like that whole lightning strike thing. That was really fascinating. Now there's another one. You've got my travel lust really inspired. The Mary Cemetery in Romania. I really want to go here. Here, I'll just get a picture and go ahead and tell us all about it.
Yeah, this is just amazing. And you really have to see the detail on them, but you can see the general idea. And that doesn't look like a normal cemetery. Those don't look like normal grave markers. And so what it was, let me get my notes up because I have lots of notes on this one. So what it was, it's in Romania, and there are 600 of these grave markers that are all hand carved. And you can see they're all in this triangle shape, kind of pointing towards heaven, or arrow shape. And so it was one guy in the 1930s, and he just he got in charge of making the gravestones or the grave markers, and this is what he did. And
I'm just going to interrupt you because I'm noticing a theme. The guy from Ghana, the guy in Prague, and now this guy. These are people who just took it upon themselves to do something cool, and it's become, it took off. So if you're an artist watching this now, do something cool, maybe it'll take off. So all right, go ahead. I'm sorry, and it had to interrupt.
And so what the kind of theme, other than they look very fun and pretty, was that you would have a carving. You can kind of see some people there. You'd have a carving of the deceased. Sometimes right before the deceased is about to die. So there's a drunk who's drinking, a guy who was a drunk and he's drinking, and the skeleton death is reaching for him. There's a guy. Yeah, there's a guy who's watching sheep or something, and there's a robber right behind him. That's how he died. The robber killed him. So it's pretty hardcore. Not all of them like that, but some of them are.
Yeah, this one was sad. It mentions how she left her sister behind and stuff.
Yeah. And so they're all hand carved, hand painted, absolutely beautiful. And there's also usually a verse, not always funny, but again, sometimes funny. There's one where someone said that he hopes there's cheese sandwiches in heaven.
This is the guy. This is the cheese sandwich guy.
Yes, I hope there's cheese sandwiches in heaven.
I could relate. He had me at cheese sandwich. I think that was my. I know that is so interesting, and just the colors are so pretty, and but there is a real tongue-in-cheek sense to the epitaphs, which surprised me. And another thing that I'm going to have to research after reading your book, because it said, I had to write this down, Zalmoxianism is the name of the religion. I had never heard of Zalmoxianism.
Yeah, very kind of local, that kind of localized belief. which I think probably is what happened in the Russian town we were talking about as well. You get these really old local beliefs that kind of
Oh,
mix,
yeah.
usually with Christianity, but with whatever dominant religion comes, and then you get kind of pockets that seem a little bit weird. But yeah, they're just holding on to kind of some old time religion. It's great.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. I just thought that was great. Okay, well, I can't believe it. We're actually approaching the top of the hour, so I want to ask any viewers who are watching right now if they have any questions for you. And so bring out the questions. I also need to tell people that I'm actually going to be on Sandra Pink's live stream on this Friday, so check it out at 6 p.m. Texas time. But meanwhile, I'm going to scroll back through the comments, and I would like to invite Kathy to tell us about, well, first of all, you need to get her book. As you can tell, we barely scratched the surface. There is so much in this book. It is so fun, and I like the lighthearted style, really great, but there's a lot of research behind it too. So get her book. But I want to hear about your next book, how that's coming. Tell us where we can find you online, and just take it away while I dig around and look for some questions here.
Yeah, you can online. You can find me on Twitter at Kathy Benjamin, just simple as that. And then Facebook, I think I'm / Kathy the Writer. And then so my new book is coming out. I think on Amazon it says August 17th. So it is available on Amazon. There's no cover yet, so you'd be buying it without seeing the cover. But you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, so you should get it anyway.
That's true.
So if you search Kathy Benjamin, It's Your Funeral, it'll pop up like first search or whatever. I wonder how haunted that. I love that.
Yeah, I wonder. I know. I bet. But that place has got to be creepy. I mean, it's creepy enough to think about.
Like hanging from it, like ghosts.
Yeah, yeah. Ghosts would be fun to go in there and do churches. Most churches don't let you do that, but it would be fun. Here's someone. They're loving it. It is, isn't it? Nitty girl. This is very interesting. You're getting lots of kudos. I'm interrupting you here, but people are loving it.
It's okay. Yes, please buy my next book. Oh my gosh, I want to be able to keep writing about death and funerals. I have so many ideas for sequels. So anyway, my next book.
Oh wow, yes.
Plan the celebration of a lifetime before it's too late. I think, especially in Western culture, we distance ourselves from death. Right now, we're kind of in a weird situation where death is knocking at the door every single day, and we're kind of more conscious of it. And I think that any silver lining you can find in this, I suppose, is that maybe we'll all start thinking about it. It's going to happen to every single one of us, every single person listening, every single person they know. And when you push it away, you end up with a dead body, which you have to do something with. You're crazy upset because this person you love is dead. It costs a ton of money, and there's so many aspects to it. There's so many different decisions to make. And I think it's incredibly cruel what we do to avoid thinking about our own death during life is to leave all that planning to our relatives when we die. Now, I'm making it sound very serious. My book is very funny, and it's about planning your own funeral. And we talk about lots of different ways of disposing of yourself, and lots of different, music. Like maybe you want, Always Look on the Bright Side of Life from Life of Brian. You can have that, so there's lots of fun, different ideas for readings, music, clothes to wear, things to get buried with. It kind of covers all those things. And so it has like history and information, but then it also has forms that you fill out. And so then you have this beautiful book that you can put somewhere, give to your family, keep it safe, keep on your bookshelf. And they know when you die, or even before you die, you talk about it. That's all the information. That's what you want done. And so you've done it.
I'm barging in to say, I totally need a copy of this book. So, I mean, when pre-order is ready or whatever, make sure I know. I will give it a shout out to my newsletter, obviously, but that book sounds so great. My father-in-law, when he passed away, he had actually planned his whole funeral proceedings to the point where we had a limo picking us up. We knew everything, and we had other stuff to deal with. Even though that was all planned with, that was such a gift that he did to us. Plus, he did it so early in his life that he got a tremendous deal. Like when they opened up the paperwork, they were like, "Whoa, how did he get this price?" But anyway, not that it's all about money. But
that's another great point is that you can pay for things now, and you get the prices now. And funerals are like weddings; the costs go up so much every year. You pay for it now. You're and you live a long life. You're gonna end up saving so much money.
Now, Debbie McWaters wants to know, what is the strangest funeral you have ever heard of?
Oh my gosh.
It's got to be hard to pick, huh?
I guess Sandra West is
Oh
the first
yeah,
one that comes to mind. It was between Alexander the Great and Sandra West. So,
yeah.
but Sandra West had a car. Was it a Cadillac? I do not remember the type of car.
I
Do you know?
researched this. I was going to put this in my book, 6 Feet Under Texas, but thanks to COVID, I wasn't able to make it down and see. I think it was a Ferrari with a seat. She's wearing a nightie. Yeah. Oh, you got her book. Oh, how nice. Yeah, I was hoping to have that in the book, but I wasn't able to travel because of the whole COVID thing, and so I wasn't able to. I thought, oh well, if I do, I'll do it again next time. But yeah,
she's Dallas, isn't it? Yeah. So Sandra West, she was married to, I think, an oil baron, someone very rich. She had a very, very, very nice car, convertible, and she didn't want to leave her car behind when she went. So she's buried in a typical cemetery, but they had to get a backhoe in, a crane, and she is in the driver's seat.
She's wearing a negligee too, with the seat comfortably tilted back, which cracks me up.
And that is how, and then they had to encase it in they had to encase the whole thing in concrete. So people, I mean, I don't know how you'd grave.
I've seen pictures. I'm like, what? I know it's a bit nuts, but yeah, that is. How many plots does that take up? I mean, yeah. Well,
I think it just shows when you're rich, you can.
You can do these things. You can pull strings. Now, another question we have.
That's weird.
This person says, you mentioned you began researching death and funerals to help overcome your fear of death. Did it help?
Yes, definitely. It's definitely something that, I mean, I'm still terrified. I don't want to die. I don't
either. Me neither. No hurry.
It's one of those things where you learn kind of what your body will do when you die, like the process that will happen. And I think, and this is also why I mentioned this in my new book about planning your funeral, it's that sense of control. Like when you know you're dying, you kind of still know what's going to happen after on Earth because you've planned it out. And so there's kind of this, and you also just kind of learn about everyone dies, we all do it. It doesn't matter what your life is, you're all going to die, and we all die, in different ways. And it's just, the more you learn, you just kind of go, okay, this is normal. This is normal. It's going to be okay. It's going to be scary. I'm not happy about it, but it's going to be okay. I do recommend learning about it. It's basically if you're afraid of spiders and you go to immersion therapy, they'll put you in a bathtub full of spiders. It's that kind of thing. I'm afraid of death. I'm going to read every book on death. I'm going to surround myself with little skeletons. All the time.
And people used to be more acquainted with death. I think it definitely helped. So I'm going to look and see if there's any more questions. Oh, here's someone who just enjoyed our show. Oh, thanks. I think this is probably Scott. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be on his show in a couple of weeks as well. I'll give that a shout out when I am. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. Did I miss any more questions? People are just enjoying it, saying it's fascinating. Someone's wishing us happy Tombstone Tuesday. Yeah, indeed.
Napa, 62 and no snow.
Oh, wow. Yeah, man. Here. People are nice. People are around watching it. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. And I really want to have you back on. That book sounds incredible. I really, your new book that you're working on, I really want to read that. That'll be great. Now, next week, I should tell people who we have coming on. We have with us, we will have Icy Sedgwick. Now, some of you may know her from the folklore podcast that she does, which is really great. You can catch it on YouTube as well. But we're going to be talking about corpse roads and cemetery folklore of the world. And Icy is a lot of fun. I think she's based in the UK, but it sounds like she's willing to stay up late for the show. So once again, I just really want to say thanks to Kathy. And thank you
for
everybody.
Having me. This is so fun.
I'm going to invite you back. We got to talk about that new book. I love that you got the worksheets and things in it. Thank you so much for being on this show. And goodbye, everybody. Thanks for
Bye. Thank you for watching, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.